The first time America realized Tom the Mongoose McEwen wasn't just another drag racer, but a walking fuse ready to blow the whole sport open was a hot summer evening at Orange County in 1969, when the sun dipped just low enough to light the strip gold, and every man in the stands swore the ground felt different that night. And that's when McEwen rolled out, not quietly, not politely, but with the swagger of a man who knew he wasn't the fastest, but he was the one everybody came to see. Tom McEwen didn't look like the killer his nickname suggested. He didn't have Don Prudhomme's laser focus. He didn't have Don Garlitz's engineering genius. Hell, he wasn't even the winningest driver in his own neighborhood. But when the Mongoose stepped onto a drag strip, every head turned. Every kid on the bleachers leaned forward. Every old racer who'd seen it all fell silent for a moment. Because something about McEwen, his stance, his smile, the way he moved around the car felt electric, dangerous. Like a man who knew he had one shot tonight to flip the entire sport upside down, and he was damn well going to take it. That night, while the track announcer hyped the next match race, half the crowd wasn't even listening. They were watching two men walk out from behind the staging lanes, two men whose rivalry would reshape drag racing forever. Tom the Mongoose McEwen and Don the Snake Prudhomme. One was the showman, one was the assassin, one won hearts, one won races. And on this night, they were about to ignite the rivalry that saved drag racing from collapsing into factory boredom and corporate scripts. Everyone expected Prudhomme's car to fire first. It always did. He was the machine, the benchmark, the driver other drivers secretly feared. But instead, McEwen beat him to it. With a snap of the ignition, his engine roared alive. With a sound that wasn't smooth or polite, it was raw, ragged, alive, almost angry. The crowd jerked forward in their seats like a wave moving across a stadium, and Mongoose just sat there in the cockpit, calm as a man lighting a cigarette on his porch. He revved it again. The headers barked, lightning in mechanical form. The sound echoed off the grandstands. Even Prudhomme, halfway through suiting up, paused for half a second, not out of fear, but out of annoyance, because he knew exactly what McEwen was doing. Showmanship, drama, theater. Mongoose was performing, and everybody knew it. And the thing is, it worked. Kids covered their ears, then peeked through their fingers like they were watching a superhero movie. Old veterans grinned, nodding like they'd just seen a ghost of drag racing's wild past come back to life. A promoter standing near the burnout box whispered, "That damn Mongoose is gonna make us rich." And he was right, because up until this rivalry, drag racing was getting predictable. The factory teams were winning everything. The cars looked the same, the interviews sounded the same, fans were losing interest. But McEwen, he understood something nobody else did. The sport didn't need another fast driver. It needed a story, a hero versus villain drama, a rivalry people would argue about at diners, gas stations, and barbershops for years. And Mongoose was more than ready to play his part. As the starter motioned them forward, Prudhomme tightened his gloves and stared straight ahead, cold, focused, already calculating the win. McEwen, meanwhile, cracked a smile inside his helmet. He didn't care what the stopwatch would say. He cared about what America would feel. And when the Christmas tree blinked down, yellow, yellow, yellow Tom, the Mongoose McEwen slammed the loud pedal like he was punching the world itself. The car exploded forward, tires clawing at the asphalt, flames spitting from the pipes, the crowd roaring like they'd just watched the earth split in half. It didn't matter who won that night. What mattered was this. This was the night the rivalry became real. This was the night the Mongoose became a legend. This was the night drag racing stopped being a sport and became a show America never forgot. The moment every great rivalry turns serious never happens on the track. It happens in the shadows, where one man finally sees what the other has truly become. And for Don the Snake Prudhomme, that moment came in the fall of 1969, inside a dusty, sun-baked California garage, where he expected to find Tom the Mongoose McEwen doing what McEwen always did. laughing, joking, talking to fans, half-tuning a motor while telling a story louder than the impact gun beside him. But that day, silence. Heavy silence. McEwen wasn't clowning around. He wasn't leaning on a fender telling lies and drinking warm Coke. He was bent over a brand new funny car body, sleeves rolled up, eyes locked in, focused in a way Prudhomme had never seen from him. And he wasn't alone. Standing next to him was a Chevrolet engineer, a real one. Clipboard, clean shirt, corporate ID badge. The kind of guy GM only sent when something extremely secret and extremely fast was happening. Prudhomme walked in and froze. The air felt wrong. Not dangerous. Competitive. Deadly competitive. McEwen finally looked up and said it with that half smile that always got under Prudhomme's skin. "Snake, you're early." Prudhomme didn't answer. His eyes locked on the car. This wasn't McEwen's sloppy, thrown-together setup anymore. The body was new, reshaped, smoothed, lighter, the front end lowered, the roofline trimmed. Everything pointed toward airflow, precision, speed, and underneath it, a motor Prudhomme didn't recognize. Not a factory block, not a standard Chevy build. Something experimental. Something Detroit wasn't admitting existed. McEwen stepped aside so Prudhomme could see it fully. "Looks different, doesn't it?" McEwen said. The Chevrolet engineer kept his eyes down, saying nothing. That silence told Prudhomme everything. Something big was happening here. Something Detroit didn't want public yet. Something McEwen had access to and he didn't. Prudhomme folded his arms. "You finally learning how to take this seriously?" McEwen nodded slowly. "Maybe I am. Maybe I got tired of watching you win." That line hit harder than nitro fumes. Because until that moment, the Snake believed the Mongoose needed him. That the rivalry only worked because Prudhomme was the faster one, the disciplined one, the one who treated drag racing like a religion instead of a circus act. But now, McEwen had a corporate engineer, a new body, a secret motor, and a look in his eyes Prudhomme had never seen. Hunger. "You always said I'm just the showman," McEwen said quietly. "Maybe the show's over." Prudhomme didn't blink, but something twisted in his chest. Fear not of losing, but of what it meant if McEwen actually matched him. If the clown became the killer. And for the first time, the Snake realized something he never expected. The Mongoose wasn't chasing him anymore. He was coming for him. The first time Tom Mongoose McEwen rolled up next to Don the Snake Prudhomme on a national stage, the crowd had no clue they were watching the beginning of a rivalry that would eventually save an entire sport. To most fans, it was just another matchup. Two young guys, two loud machines, two lanes of burning rubber and nitro. But to the old-timers standing near the guardrail, something felt different, like the air itself was tightening, like fate had quietly pulled two opposites onto the same strip at the exact right moment. Prudhomme stood on one side of the lane, silent, expressionless, arms crossed, eyes locked on the quarter mile, like he was staring straight through it. He didn't smile, didn't wave, didn't even look at the crowd. That was Snake. All business, all speed. Tom McEwen, on the other hand, leaned against his funny car with that trademark grin, the kind of grin that made fans feel like they were part of an inside joke. He tapped his helmet, pointed at the bleachers, winked at a kid holding a homemade sign. McEwen understood something nobody else had figured out yet. People don't just want to watch cars go fast. They want someone to cheer for, someone who feels human, someone who reminds them of themselves. The staging lanes got quiet, the kind of quiet that's not really quiet at all, just muffled tension holding its breath. McEwen looked across the lane at Prudhomme, and for 1 second, their eyes met. Snake didn't blink, didn't nod, didn't acknowledge him at all, and McEwen thought, perfect, let them think we hate each other. Let them pick a side. When the engines fired, the ground shook. Prudhomme's car barked to life like a machine built by scientists. Controlled, predictable, ruthlessly efficient. McEwen's car came alive like a wild animal, growling, spitting flame, shaking the pavement under his boots. Fans could feel the difference even with their eyes closed. The burnouts were the first hint of how this rivalry would work. Prudhomme executed a perfect, clinical burnout. Straight, clean, exactly as long as necessary. McEwen put on a show. He smoked the tires halfway to the Christmas tree, filled the strip with a rolling white fog, and the crowd erupted like they'd just seen fireworks on the 4th of July. Snake didn't react, but he felt it. The run itself took less than 8 seconds, but those seconds rewrote drag racing. Snake shot off the line first. Perfect reaction, perfect traction, perfect discipline. McEwen chased him like a man breaking out of a cage, the car twitching and skating, the engine howling like it wanted to tear itself apart. At the finish line, the difference was barely a blink. Snake won on the stopwatch. McEwen won in the bleachers. And as they turned off the track and headed down the return road, McEwen waved both arms out the window like he'd just won the World Series. Prudhomme didn't wave at all. He didn't have to. The rivalry had been born. And everyone who saw it, everyone who felt that electricity, knew drag racing had just changed forever. By the time the sun set on that first showdown, word was already spreading across the pits like wildfire. Mongoose gave Snake a run for his money. It didn't matter that Prudhomme had technically won. In drag racing, time slips tell you who crossed the line first, but the fans decide who becomes a legend. And fans were lining up around McEwen's pit like it was a carnival booth. Kids wanted autographs. Old mechanics wanted to shake his hand. Track promoters wanted his phone number. And through it all, McEwen kept that casual grin. The one that said, "Yeah, I knew this would happen." Meanwhile, just a few spots down the pits, Prudhomme sat alone on a folding chair next to his car, staring at the engine like he was dissecting it with his mind. His crew whispered around him carefully. Nobody dared to joke. Nobody dared to interrupt. Snake didn't talk. Snake calculated. For every loud cheer McEwen earned, Prudhomme earned silence thick, heavy, intimidating silence. The kind that makes you wonder what a man is planning. And the truth was simple. Prudhomme wasn't thinking about fame or fans. He didn't care who cheered for McEwen or who called him the future. All he cared about was speed, winning, precision, the next tenth of a second. But that difference, McEwen's showmanship versus Prudhomme's obsession, was exactly what the sport needed. It was Hollywood versus Detroit, flash versus discipline. The guy who could make you laugh versus the guy who could make you hold your breath. Promoters saw the opportunity first. They called each other from payphones, from track offices, from greasy backroom bars connected to drag strips across America. "We need these two on the same card. Book them together. Build the whole weekend around Snake and Mongoose." Within weeks, race posters changed. No more generic fonts, no more plain car photos. Now it was Snake versus Mongoose, the match race of the year, with their faces side by side like heavyweight boxers. For the first time in drag racing history, drivers were the main attraction, not the cars. Fans didn't just ask, who won? They asked, what did Mongoose do today? Did Snake outrun him? Did they race side by side? And here's the thing, McEwen knew exactly how to pour gasoline on that fire. At one race in Orange County, he walked right up to Prudhomme in front of a crowd, looked at him dead in the eye, and said loudly enough for fans to hear, "Hope you brought your real motor today. Snake, I'd hate to embarrass you in front of all these folks." Snake didn't even blink. He just tightened his gloves, climbed into the cockpit, and snapped his helmet on with a level of calm that made the crowd erupt. And the runs? They were insane, close, violent, unpredictable. If Snake got the whole shot, McEwen chased him like his life depended on it. If McEwen cut a perfect light, Snake hunted him down with machine-like precision. Every time they lined up, the stands filled. Every time they fired their engines, fans stood. Every time the wind light flickered, grown men pumped their fists like they were teenagers again. Drag racing finally had something money couldn't buy. A rivalry that felt personal, emotional, and real. And in a sport fighting for survival, Snake and Mongoose weren't just racing, they were carrying the weight of the entire drag racing world on their backs. And both men knew it. even if they never said it out loud. The rivalry was hot, the crowds were bigger than ever, and drag racing was finally breaking into the mainstream. But what nobody realized, not the fans, not the promoters, not even the reporters writing breathless headlines, was that the best chapter of the Snake Mongoose story wasn't coming from the track. It was building quietly, behind the scenes, in boardrooms, diner booths, motels, and whispered conversations between two men who were supposed to hate each other. See, the money in drag racing back then was terrible. Drivers barely made enough to cover blown engines and gas for the truck. Most of them slept in their trailers, patched their suits with duct tape, and borrowed fuel from friendly pits after an engine explosion. But match races? Those were reliable. If you had a name, you got booked. And if you got booked, you got paid. Snake understood this. Mongoose understood it even better. And while fans saw them as natural enemies, two titans clashing on the track, they were quietly becoming something much more dangerous together. Businessmen. Real businessmen. Men who understood that drag racing wasn't surviving on horsepower anymore. It needed something bigger, something bold. Something that made Americans stop flipping the TV channel and say, "Hold on, what the hell is that?" That moment arrived in late 1969, long after midnight, inside a cheap motel room with fading wallpaper and a buzzing neon sign leaking pink light through the curtains. Prudhomme was sitting at the desk, sorting through time slips, always calculating. McEwen was lying on the bed, hands behind his head, staring at the ceiling like a man dreaming up trouble. "Snake," he finally said, "I got an idea." Prudhomme didn't look up. That's usually bad news. This one's different. Snake sighed. "You say that every time." But McEwen sat up, leaned forward, and said a sentence that would change drag racing forever. "What if we stop selling just the races and start selling ourselves?" Snake finally looked over. "What are you talking about?" "Kids, Snake. Kids buy toys. Kids buy lunchboxes. Kids buy t-shirts. What if we made NHRA the next baseball, the next wrestling, the next spectacle?" Prudhomme stared at him like he was insane. "Tom, we race cars. We don't sell toys." But McEwen shook his head. "Not yet." And that's when he pulled out a sketch he'd been hiding. Two funny cars, one painted like a mongoose, one painted like a cobra, facing each other like superheroes in a comic book panel. Snake laughed. "It's ridiculous." Mongoose grinned. "Exactly. That's why it'll work. What happened next has gone down in motorsports history as one of the gutsiest business moves anyone ever pulled." McEwen marched straight into a Mattel boardroom. Yes, the Mattel that made Hot Wheels, and pitched them something no racing driver had dared suggest before: a full-blown corporate sponsorship. Not a few stickers. Not a small cash deal. A real partnership. The executives were polite at first, smiling the way businessmen smile when they're humoring a dreamer. After all, drag racing wasn't football or baseball. It wasn't the Super Bowl. It wasn't even primetime television. It was loud, dangerous, unpredictable, and completely unpolished. But then McEwen showed them the posters, the sketches, the crowds, the lineups, the headlines calling Snake and Mongoose the biggest rivalry in racing since Petty versus Pearson. He laid out his pitch like a showman selling the greatest act on earth. "Listen," he said, "you could sponsor any race, any league, any team, but sponsor us, and you'll be sponsoring America's next obsession. The kids love us. The dads love us. The cars are wild. The names are perfect. And the rivalry is real. You want toys that fly off the shelves? Put a Hot Wheels logo on a Snake car and a Mongoose car and watch what happens." The room went silent. Then one executive leaned forward. "Can you guarantee the rivalry is real?" McEwen smiled, the most dangerous smile of his career. "Do you think Snake and I would lie about that?" They signed the deal, right there, on the spot. Overnight, two drag racers went from dusty track warriors to national icons. The first ever corporate sponsorship in drag racing history wasn't one on horsepower. It was one with personality, rivalry, and guts. But the real shock came when they unveiled the new cars. At Lion's Drag Strip, the pits were packed. People were climbing fences, standing on pickup roofs, holding their kids on their shoulders. And when McEwen rolled out the first Hot Wheels Mongoose car, painted in blazing bright colors that made every other funny car look like a rusty farm truck, the place erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters crowded the lanes. Kids lost their minds. Then Prudhomme rolled out the snake car, sleek, sharp, menacing yellow and blue, looking like it had been sketched by a comic book artist hopped up on jet fuel. The announcer didn't even need a script. He just started yelling, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is drag racing's future." Overnight, Snake and Mongoose became household names. They weren't just racers, they were characters, heroes, icons. The rivalry had evolved from two men chasing trophies to two archetypes battling for America's imagination. And here's the part the fans never saw. Snake didn't like the toy stuff at first. He wanted wins, pure wins. But even he had to admit it. When thousands of kids showed up at the track waving Hot Wheels toys shaped like his car, he felt something he'd never felt before: pride, responsibility, legacy. Mongoose watched all of it with a grin. He knew what he'd created. He knew he'd just saved the sport. And deep down, Snake knew it too, even if he'd never say it out loud. That sponsorship didn't just pay for parts. It didn't just put food on the table. It kept drag racing alive during its most dangerous years. It kept the crowds coming. It kept the promoters in business. It brought new fans, kids who would grow up worshiping quarter-mile gladiators. Snake versus Mongoose wasn't just a rivalry anymore. It was America's rivalry. One built on noise, color, danger, personality, and marketing genius. And every time they lined up after that, the stakes weren't just about bragging rights. They were carrying the sport on their backs. And both men felt the weight, even if they pretended the only thing that mattered was beating the guy in the other lane. Just like that, the outlaw sport of noise and nitro had become a national spectacle, and the two men who made it happen were only getting started. The rivalry was huge, the crowds were bigger, and Snake and Mongoose were becoming the closest thing drag racing ever had to rock stars. But success in drag racing always comes with a price, and by the early 1970 seconds, both men were living on the razor's edge. Corporate sponsorship looked glamorous from the outside, but behind closed doors it came with the kind of pressure only two men carrying an entire sport could understand. Track promoters weren't just booking races anymore, they were booking events, shows, spectacles built entirely around one promise: Snake versus Mongoose, one more time. And if one of them blew an engine, too bad. The crowd didn't pay to watch oil spills. They paid to watch a rivalry they believed in with their whole hearts. For Prudhomme, the pressure was almost unbearable. Snake had always been the disciplined one, the mechanic at heart, the craftsman. He woke up thinking about traction compound and went to sleep thinking about blower pulleys. Losing a race wasn't just an L in the record book, it felt like a personal failure. He couldn't shake it. He couldn't let it go. Every defeat sat on his shoulders like a sack of bricks. Meanwhile, Mongoose handled pressure the only way he knew how. He smiled through it. He joked. He charmed. He shook hands with every kid in the pits. He played the showman because the show had to go on. But behind the grin, he was carrying something just as heavy: money problems, broken parts, a team held together with duct tape and luck, and the knowledge that if Snake beat him too badly for too long, the rivalry might collapse, and with it, the entire business model that kept them both alive. This was the part of the story fans never saw. The part that didn't make the magazines or the Hot Wheels commercials. In the daylight, they were enemies. At night, they were two exhausted men sitting in the dark corners of motel parking lots, leaning against trailer fenders, talking about blower failures and main bearings like soldiers swapping stories after battle. One night, one that Snake later said he'd never forget, they were parked behind an old track in Texas after a long, brutal double show. Snake had won both rounds. Mongoose had blown a blower and a piston. The crowd loved it. The promoters loved it. Mattel loved it. But Mongoose? He was sitting on the tongue of his trailer, elbows on his knees, staring at the ground like a man trying to figure out how to breathe again. Snake walked over, wiping his hands on a red shop towel. "Rough day," he said gently. Mongoose laughed once, a tired, broken sound. "Story of my life, buddy." Snake sat down beside him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Just the sound of cicadas and the ticking of hot engines cooling in the Texas night. "You know," Mongoose finally muttered, "everybody thinks I'm the fun one." Snake glanced over. "You are?" "Yeah," Mongoose said, rubbing his face. "But I'm also the one who has to pretend everything's fine when the bank account says otherwise." Snake didn't say anything. He didn't have to. He understood more than anyone realized. Being an icon was expensive. Being a showman was exhausting. And being the other half of the most important rivalry in drag racing history meant you couldn't let the world see you fall. Then Mongoose said something that stuck with Snake for decades. "Man, what happens if one of us stops winning?" Snake looked at him. "Then the other keeps winning," he said. Mongoose shook his head. "No, Snake. This thing, we built it together. If either one of us falls too far behind, the whole rivalry dies." Snake wanted to brush it off. Tell him he was being dramatic. Tell him everything would work out. But he knew Mongoose was right. Their rivalry wasn't just two men racing. It was the spine that held up the entire sport's popularity. If the Mongoose faded, the Snake had no one to strike at. And the whole country, kids, dads, sponsors, reporters, would move on to the next shiny distraction. That was the unspoken truth they both lived with every day. They weren't just racing each other. They were racing for the soul of the sport. And then came the moment that turned pressure into electricity. The moment older drag racing fans still talk about today as the peak of Snake and Mongoose's golden era. It was the height of summer at Orange County International Raceway. The sun was low, the air was hot and thick, and 25,000 fans were packed into the stands wearing sunglasses, waving pennants, holding Hot Wheels toys, screaming for blood. The announcer's voice was shaking with excitement. The smell of nitro was so strong you could taste it. And that night, for the first time on camera, the crowd was about to witness Snake versus Mongoose with the full power of the Hot Wheels machine behind it. The rivalry wasn't a rivalry anymore. It was a national event. Snake rolled up, first calm, focused, visor down, engine snarling like a chained animal. Then Mongoose rolled out smiling, waving, playing to the crowd like the showman he was born to be. But behind that smile, for the first time in a long time, he actually believed he could win. Because earlier that afternoon, deep in the pits, his crew had found something tiny, yet game-changing. A fuel curve adjustment, a timing tweak, a little secret that gave him just enough edge to take the fight to Snake again. When the yellow lights dropped, both cars launched like rockets. Flames shot out from the headers, the track shook, the crowd exploded. And halfway down the strip, something insane happened. For the first time in over a year, Mongoose was ahead. Snake saw it, the crowd saw it, America saw it. That run, those 4 seconds of violence, weren't just a race. They were salvation. Proof the rivalry was still alive. Proof the sport still had a heartbeat. Proof that two men, carrying the weight of an entire culture, could still deliver magic when it mattered most. And when Mongoose crossed the stripe first, the stadium erupted so loudly, veterans said it felt like the bleachers shook. Snake shut off, coasted to a stop, took a long breath, and smiled, a real one. Because deep down he knew drag racing needed this. He needed this. They needed this. The Snake and the Mongoose were alive again. When Mongoose crossed the finish line first that night, it didn't just stun the crowd, it shook the entire drag racing world. Promoters who had quietly started doubting him suddenly realized he wasn't done yet. Sponsors who were leaning harder towards Snake perked up and remembered why they signed the partnership in the first place. And Snake, when he got out of his car at the top end and walked over to Mongoose in the shutdown area, he wasn't angry. He wasn't bitter. He wasn't even frustrated. He was proud. Because he knew what every old-school racer in America knew deep down. A rivalry isn't a rivalry unless both men can punch back. Snake walked up, helmet under his arm, and Mongoose was standing beside his car with that crooked smile, the one that always looked like he knew something nobody else did. Snake smirked and shook his head. "About time you woke up," he said. Mongoose laughed. "About time you slowed down," they laughed. And for a moment, it didn't feel like two men fighting for their careers. It felt like two kids on a playground, throwing dirt, chasing glory, daring each other to jump higher and run faster. The rivalry wasn't born from hatred. It never was. It was born from fire, two different fires, burning for two different reasons. Snake was driven by the pursuit of perfection. Mongoose was driven by the pursuit of excitement. And somewhere between those two philosophies, American drag racing found its soul again. But the celebration didn't last long. Because behind them, behind the cheering fans and the exploding fireworks and the Hot Wheels banners, something was happening inside the sport. Something dangerous. Something neither Snake nor Mongoose could see coming. Drag racing was changing. The cars were getting faster. The stakes were getting higher. The costs were skyrocketing. And the men behind the wheel were being pushed to limits they weren't designed to survive. The 1,970 seconds were a golden era because they were chaotic, loud, unpredictable, but they were also deadly. And the next chapter of their rivalry would test them in ways no toy deal, no sponsorship check, no cheering crowd could fix. The first warning came in the form of a letter. Promoters were beginning to demand not just match races, but full-blown spectacles, side-by-side burnouts, staged confrontations, the kind of hyper-theatrical nonsense that television executives loved. Snake hated it. Too gimmicky, too dangerous, too far from the purity of racing. Mongoose understood it and hated it too, but he knew the business side. Being a showman was his gift and his curse. He couldn't turn off the part of him that wanted fans to leave with a story they'd tell for years. But the pressure created cracks, small at first, then wider, then deep enough that even fans in the cheap seats could feel the tension. One night in 1973, at a packed match race outside Chicago, things boiled over. Mongoose had been struggling with traction all weekend. His crew was exhausted. One of his guys had burned his hands on a header earlier. Spirits were low, money was tight, and Snake was running the strongest car he'd ever built. Before the final race of the night, Mongoose slammed his helmet down on the roof of his car and muttered, "If I don't give these people a show, we don't get booked next season." His crew chief shook his head. "Tom, the car's not ready for anything crazy." Mongoose didn't care. The crowd was chanting. The pressure was suffocating. And in his mind, the rivalry had become bigger than safety, bigger than logic, bigger than the warnings echoing from the pits. Meanwhile, Snake was inside his trailer, adjusting his clutch settings with the calm precision of a surgeon. He had no idea Mongoose was about to do something reckless. When they rolled into the water box, the crowd started roaring before either car even fired. Snake performed a clean, controlled burnout, the kind of textbook execution that made other drivers jealous. Then Mongoose rolled forward, engine snarling, and launched into a burnout so violent the entire left header turned bright orange. Fans went insane. Snake stared across the lanes, eyes narrowing. Something was wrong. When they staged, the Christmas tree flickered yellow. Snake focused on the bulb. Mongoose was bouncing the throttle like a man trying to summon courage from the engine bay. The tree dropped. Both cars launched. But 300 feet out, Mongoose's car made a move that made every man in the grandstands gasp. It hooked left, nose toward the center line, and came within inches of crossing straight into Snake's lane at 220 miles per hour. Snake lifted instantly. Mongoose didn't. The Mongoose car fishtailed violently, straightened, then snapped right like a wild animal breaking free. When he crossed the stripe, fans were still screaming, not in celebration, but in shock. Snake coasted to a stop, heart pounding, hands still shaking inside his gloves. For the first time in their long rivalry, he was scared, not of losing, not of failure, but of losing Mongoose for good. At the top end, Mongoose climbed out, ripped his helmet off, and leaned against the guardrail as if trying not to collapse. When Snake reached him, he didn't yell, he didn't criticize, he didn't preach. He just stood there, breathing hard, and waited. Finally, Mongoose said, voice shaky, "I was trying to give them a show." Snake stared at him, eyes cold. "You almost gave them a funeral." Mongoose didn't respond. He didn't have to. Because in that moment, under the buzzing lights, with the smell of burning nitro still hanging in the air, he understood something he had forgotten. Drag racing wasn't a performance. It was survival. The rivalry wasn't theater. It was bone-deep respect wrapped in adrenaline. And if either of them forgot that for even a second, everything they built could disappear in a single heartbeat. That night, they loaded their cars in silence. No jokes, no handshakes, no crowds around the haulers. Just two men, exhausted, sobered, humbled, wondering if they had pushed the sport and each other too far. But the truth was this: legends don't break during moments like these. They harden. And the bond between Snake and Mongoose was about to become stronger than ever. In the weeks after that near disaster in Chicago, something changed between Snake and Mongoose. Something quiet, something unspoken, but powerful enough that even longtime racers standing near their pits felt it. The rivalry was still alive, still fiery, still magnetic, but underneath it grew a new layer of understanding. They weren't kids anymore. They weren't chasing cheap thrills on old airstrips. They weren't two young hotshots trying to prove who could leave the bigger burnout. They were icons now carrying a sport on their backs, whether they liked it or not. And America? America was watching every move. After the Chicago scare, Mongoose went home to recalibrate not just his car, but himself. He sat alone in his garage in Fountain Valley, staring at the stripped-down chassis sitting on jack stands, the smell of solvent in the air, the metallic echo of tools settling on concrete. For the first time in a long time, he asked himself questions he didn't like the answers to. Am I pushing too hard? Do I still have the instincts? What good is showmanship if the show kills me? Meanwhile, Snake was in his own shop, wiping down parts with that signature intensity, organized, meticulous, methodical. Snake didn't wrestle with self-doubt the way Mongoose did. His demons were different. His fear wasn't losing control, it was losing purpose. Because without Mongoose pushing him, irritating him, teasing him, chasing him, breathing down his neck, who was he? A champion? Sure. A legend? Undoubtedly. But the rivalry was the spark. It was the fire in his lungs each time he suited up. And now, after Chicago, Snake found himself checking the phone more often, waiting for Mongoose to call, waiting for a sign that the show wasn't over. Then, one quiet Tuesday morning, the phone finally rang. Snake grabbed it instantly. "Don?" Mongoose said. Snake answered with a voice that tried and failed to hide relief. "Yeah, you busy this weekend?" "Not really." "Good," Mongoose said. "Pack the trailer. I got us a match race." Snake frowned. "A match race? After what happened?" "Exactly after what happened," Mongoose replied. "We're not letting that be the story." Click. That was it. That was the whole invitation. And Snake smiled, because that was vintage Mongoose, bold, stubborn, impossible to predict, and just crazy enough to be right. That weekend, they rolled into Orange County International Raceway, a track every California drag racer knew like the back of their hand. The sunset painted the sky orange. Crews were tuning engines under glowing bulbs, and fans were already lined up against the fences, whispering, "Snake and Mongoose are back. Did you hear what happened in Chicago?" They wouldn't race again if they didn't trust each other. The tension was heavy, but beneath it, something else. Hope. The kind old American men in lawn chairs feel when they recognize history forming in front of them. Snake and Mongoose parked their trailers side by side, not something they normally did. Usually, Mongoose liked distance, noise, chaos, music blasting. Snake preferred order, calm, laser focus. But tonight was different. When the sun dipped below the hills, Mongoose walked toward Snake's trailer holding 2 cups of coffee, cheap track coffee that tasted like burnt gravel. Snake raised an eyebrow. "Since when do you drink coffee?" I don't, Mongoose grinned. But they didn't have hot chocolate. Snake smirked. A small, silent peace offering. Then Mongoose leaned against the trailer. Hey, he said quietly. About Chicago. Snake shook his head. Doesn't matter. You're here. That's what matters. Mongoose nodded. Not another word. They suited up. They walked side by side toward the starting line. Two silhouettes stepping into the glow of floodlights, the crowd rising as if guided by instinct. The announcer's voice cracked through the speakers with a kind of reverence usually reserved for war heroes and astronauts. Ladies and gentlemen, the rivalry that made drag racing famous is back. The engines fired. Snake's car rumbled with that deep, confident, thump-controlled violence. Mongoose's engine crackled sharp and wild, like a beast pacing the cage, waiting for someone to unlatch the door. They did their burnouts perfect burnouts. Not reckless, not theatrical, just right. The smell of nitro layered itself over the track like warm fog. The fans leaned forward. Snake pre-staged. Mongoose pre-staged. Snake staged. Mongoose staged. The tree dropped. For 1,000 feet, they were side by side, perfect symmetry, perfect balance. Two men proving to themselves and to everyone watching that the rivalry still lived, still breathed, still mattered. At the stripe, Snake edged ahead by inches. Inches. When they rolled to a stop at the top end, Snake climbed out, pulled off his helmet, and turned around expecting Mongoose to be frustrated. Instead, Mongoose was laughing genuine, loud, joyful laughter. "Hell of a run, Don!" he shouted. Snake grinned back. "You almost had me." Mongoose shrugged. "Would've, if I hadn't eaten that burrito at lunch." They laughed like brothers tired, bruised, aging brothers who had spent half their lives trying to outrun each other and the other half realizing they needed each other. The fans went wild. The newspapers the next morning wrote the same headline coast to coast: "The rivalry returns." And from that night on, the sport felt alive again. Not because of sponsorships, not because of toy deals, not because of TV ratings, but because two men, two completely different men, refused to let drag racing lose its heart. What nobody knew that night at Orange County was that Snake had been carrying something heavy on his shoulders for months, something he hadn't told Mongoose, something he didn't want to admit even to himself. His body was getting tired, not a little tired. The kind of tired that creeps into your bones when you've spent 20 years sitting in cars that shake your spine loose at 250 miles per hour. The kind of tired that makes the steering wheel feel heavier each season. The kind of tired older racers recognized instantly when they watched him walk back to his pit. Snake hid it better than most, kept the smile sharp, kept the posture tall, but Mongoose saw it the moment Snake pulled off his helmet at the top end of that track. There was a flicker in Snake's eyes, just for a second, like the light of a man who knows that the finish line of a career is somewhere on the horizon. And Mongoose, despite being the wild one, the loud one, the chaotic one, knew exactly what that flicker meant, because he'd felt it too, years earlier, alone, in silence, after losing friends, after wrecks, after seeing too many men eat the guardrail when their luck ran out. But Mongoose had pushed through it by sheer stubbornness. Snake, he pushed through it with discipline, routine, precision, and discipline always cracks before stubbornness does. That night, after the fans left and the trailers hummed quietly in the cool California air, Snake sat alone on the tailgate of his truck, helmet beside him, staring at the empty track. Mongoose approached without making a sound rare for him. He stood next to Snake, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the strip that had defined both their lives. "You good?" Mongoose asked. Snake nodded, but his voice didn't match. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" After a long silence, Snake finally said it. "How many more of these do we have in us?" Mongoose didn't laugh, didn't joke, didn't brush it off. Instead, he lowered himself onto the tailgate next to Snake and let the quiet settle between them like dust on an old fender. "We'll stop," Mongoose eventually said, "when the fire's gone, not a moment before." Snake exhaled slowly. That was the answer he needed, even if it wasn't the answer he asked for. Because deep down, Snake feared something far worse than slowing down. He feared becoming irrelevant, forgotten, overshadowed by younger, louder, wilder racers who never knew what it meant to drive a car that tried to kill you every time the clutch dropped. And Mongoose, somehow sensing this, leaned back on his hands and said, "Hey, Don, look around. No one's replacing us. They're just following the trail we burned." Snake smirked. "You burned more of it than I did." "Damn right," Mongoose said, "and you cleaned up the rest." They laughed softly, and for a moment, the weight on Snake's shoulders felt lighter. But the truth didn't disappear. It just faded into the background like the echo of an engine cooling down. A month later, they found themselves racing again, this time in Seattle. Overcast skies, cold track, packed stands full of old-school fans wearing jackets from the 70 seconds covered in patches. The kind of crowd that still brought folding chairs and thermoses of black coffee. And here's the thing about those old fans, they weren't just cheering for the spectacle. They were cheering for survival, for endurance, for two men who had given America something it didn't even realize it needed. Hope. A reminder that not all rivalries destroy men, some rivalries build them. Before the final round, as Snake tightened the last bolt on his blower restraint, Mongoose walked over and said something Snake never expected to hear. Not ever. Not in a million years. "Listen, Don, if you want this one tonight, it's yours." Snake froze. "What's that supposed to mean?" "I can ease off, give you clean air, let you take it." Snake stared at him like he'd gone insane. "I don't want charity." "It's not charity," Mongoose said softly. "It's respect." Snake shook his head. "No, you run your race. I'll run mine." Mongoose smiled. Not his cocky smile, his brother smile. "Good," he said. "I was hoping you'd say that." That night, they didn't race like rivals. They didn't race like enemies. They raced like two men carving their names into the final chapter of an era. At the stripe, Mongoose edged Snake by a whisper, maybe a foot, maybe less. Snake climbed out of his car, already smiling, because he knew the truth. He didn't need the win. He needed the chase. He needed the roar. He needed the fire. And as the crowd roared loud enough to rattle the aluminum bleachers, Snake realized something he had forgotten for years. As long as the fans were standing, as long as the engine was warm, as long as the track lights were on, he wasn't done. Not yet. When the season finally wound down, when the last trailer door slammed shut and the autumn wind started sweeping empty hot dog wrappers across deserted parking lots, something strange happened in the world of drag racing. Everywhere Snake and Mongoose went, old men came up to them not for autographs, not for photos, but to say something they never expected to hear while they were still racing. Thank you. Not good run, not nice pass. Just thank you for keeping the sport alive, for keeping the heart beating, for giving people something to believe in when everything outside the drag strip felt like it was falling apart. Vietnam, oil crisis, factory shutdowns. America changed fast in the 70 seconds. Too fast. But for a few precious hours each weekend, when Snake and Mongoose lined up side by side under the lights, people felt normal again. People felt young again. People felt American again. And deep down, both men knew something the newspapers never printed, something sponsors never branded, something NHRA never admitted out loud. Their rivalry didn't save drag racing because of the wins. It saved drag racing because of the humanity. Because on one side of the track you had the careful surgeon, the man who treated engines like living creatures. And on the other, the street fighter, the wild card who would burn half the track down just to prove a point. The crowd didn't see two machines racing. They saw two philosophies colliding. Two versions of America battling down a quarter mile. And somehow, both versions were right. Years later, long after the match race era faded and new generations took over the sport, Snake and Mongoose were invited to a reunion event. Big stage, packed crowd, old banners hung from the rafters. A tribute to the past. Snake walked out stiff but proud. Mongoose walked out limping, but still grinning like he was about to run someone for cash behind a bowling alley. And the moment the announcer said their names, the crowd stood. Not one section, not one pocket, the entire arena. Thousands of people, gray hair, leather jackets, faded sponsor shirts, old drag strip wristbands, still on their keychains, standing like they were welcoming home two soldiers who'd been gone too long. Snake looked over at Mongoose. Mongoose looked over at Snake. And both men realized at the exact same time. The rivalry didn't define them. The fans did. The sport did. The stories did. The quarter mile did. And the reason they were still remembered decades later was simple. They made drag racing bigger than speed. They made it emotional. They made it human. They made it legend. And legends don't die. Not as long as someone somewhere is still telling the story. If you grew up watching these two tear up the quarter mile, if you remember those posters on your bedroom wall, those Hot Wheels sets on the living room floor, those nights standing in the bleachers with the smell of nitro thick in the air, then you were part of the era they built with their bare hands. And if you want more stories like this, stories about the men, the machines, and the madness that built American motorsports, make sure you subscribe, drop a like, and stick around. Because we've got a whole lot more legends to bring back to life.